At the heart of Innovate Dynamics, a covert and complex digital attack threatens to dismantle the company. A hidden backdoor left by its founder, Julian Vance, years ago opens the door to a major sabotage targeting the firm's most critical project. CEO Jonathan Sterling and the high school-age son of a newly hired engineer, Marcus Hayes, embark on a fierce battle to protect both the company's future and their own reputations against this invisible enemy. A war unfolds, shaped by betrayal and the fusion of technology and strategy, revealing the unexpected strength of a family united. If you liked the video and subscribe to the channel, let's move on to our story. Enjoy watching. The air in the Innovate Dynamics headquarters was thick with the scent of stale coffee and desperation. A frantic energy pulsed through the open-plan office, a palpable sense of a company teetering on the edge of a cliff. The hum of servers and the low murmur of harried conversations were the company's only heartbeat, a rhythm of failure. For 3 months, Innovate Dynamics, a titan of logistical software, had been bleeding projects. Missed deadlines, client complaints, and catastrophic system failures were no longer anomalies. They were the new normal. The stock price had cratered, a jagged line on the charts that looked like a heart monitor flatlining. Up on the 48th floor, in an office of polished mahogany and panoramic city views, CEO Jonathan Sterling felt the company's decline in his bones. He was a man who had built his empire on precision and foresight, but now he was navigating a storm with no compass. His face, usually a mask of calm authority, was etched with fatigue. He stared out the window, watching the city below go about its orderly business, a stark contrast to the maelstrom he was trapped in. He had hired every consultant, run every diagnostic, and called in every favor. The consensus was always the same: it was a cascade of human error, a systemic breakdown of communication and process. But Sterling, a man who trusted data above all, felt it was a lie. The failures were too specific, too targeted. It was as if a ghost was haunting the code, plucking out essential threads at the worst possible moments. The latest casualty was Project Nightingale, a high-stakes deal with a global pharmaceutical firm. The entire scheduling module had simply vanished from the servers. Not deleted, not corrupted, just gone. It was impossible, and yet the evidence was undeniable. The lead engineer, a man with a 20-year spotless record, had sworn he had uploaded the final build. The security logs showed no external breaches. It was the same story, different project. A pattern was emerging, one that defied all logic and conventional wisdom. It was a digital poltergeist, and it was going to be the death of his company. On the 32nd floor, in a sea of cubicles, David Hayes was feeling the full force of the chaos. As the new senior data architect, he had been brought in to introduce a new, more resilient database schema. He was brilliant, a soft-spoken giant in his field, but his talent was being drowned out by the constant fire drills. His cubicle was an island of order in a sea of crumpled papers and panicked chatter. Today, his son Marcus had been scheduled to shadow him for the afternoon as part of a high school career program. Marcus, a lanky 17-year-old with an encyclopedic knowledge of computer systems that went far beyond his years, was not a typical teenager. He saw the world in lines of code and logical dependencies. Marcus sat quietly, his eyes darting from screen to screen. He watched as his father and a team of engineers desperately tried to roll back the Nightingale project, a task made impossible by the fact that the backup files were also inexplicably corrupted. Marcus's mind was a flurry of calculations. He wasn't just seeing the problem, he was seeing the space around the problem. He noticed the rhythm of the failures. The scheduling module was gone, but the front-end user interface, an entirely separate code base, had also suffered a seemingly unrelated bug. The two weren't directly linked in the system's architecture, yet they had both been hit at the same time. "Dad, why did the UI also crash?" Marcus asked, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere. David, his brow furrowed in concentration, didn't look up. "Coincidence, son. It's a complete mess." "But the UI bug is in the login process," Marcus pressed. "That's a completely different part of the code base than the scheduling module. Why would they fail at the exact same moment?" One of the senior engineers scoffed without looking away from his monitor. "Kid, when a system fails this hard, everything breaks. It's dominoes." Marcus didn't argue. He just kept watching. He noticed another detail. The security logs didn't show a breach, but they did show an unusual spike in internal network traffic, a massive, unclassified data transfer that had occurred at the precise moment of the failure. It had been dismissed as a system fluke, an artifact of the rollback process. But Marcus, with a mind unclouded by corporate assumptions, saw it for what it was: a signal, not a symptom. He saw a hidden layer of logic, a ghost in the machine that was manipulating not just the code, but the perception of the problem itself. He realized what was wrong. The system wasn't failing, it was being pruned. The projects weren't disappearing, they were being moved. He waited until his father was on a call, his voice tight with frustration. He quietly stood up and walked toward the elevator. The security guard at the elevator bank, a large man with a weary smile, watched him go. "Your dad's still working, kid." "I know," Marcus said. "I just need to find the bathroom on a different floor." He took the elevator all the way to the 48th floor. The doors opened to a silent, pristine world. A young, polished assistant sat at a desk of polished glass. Her nameplate read Ms. Chin. "I'm here to see Mr. Sterling," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his pounding heart. Ms. Chin gave him a polite, pitying smile. "Do you have an appointment?" "No. But it's urgent. It's about Project Nightingale." The name of the project got her attention. She picked up the phone, her eyes scanning Marcus's unwrinkled t-shirt and jeans. "Mr. Sterling, there's a young man here to see you. He says it's urgent and that it's about Nightingale." There was a pause, a clipped voice on the other end. "Who is he? Did you say he had an appointment?" "No, sir. He just said he knows something about Project Nightingale." Miss Chin looked at Marcus again, her expression softening slightly. It was a day of impossible problems. What was one more? She put the phone down. "He'll see you. You have 2 minutes." Marcus walked into the office and saw Sterling for the first time. The man looked nothing like the confident titan in his corporate headshots. He looked defeated. Sterling gestured toward a chair. "Sit. My assistant tells me you have some information about Project Nightingale." Marcus didn't sit. He stood, his hands clasped behind his back, his posture radiating a quiet confidence that was entirely out of place for a teenager in the CEO's office. "The problem isn't with Project Nightingale, sir. It's with the entire system." Sterling's face hardened. He was in no mood for theatrics. "I am aware that we have a systemic problem, son. I've had 3 consulting firms tell me that. Now, if you have a solution, I suggest you get to the point. My time is not free." Marcus nodded. "The failures aren't random. They're a feature, not a bug. They're designed to be a diversion." Sterling leaned forward, his face a mask of incredulity. "A diversion? For what, exactly? And who are you?" "My name is Marcus Hayes. My father, David, is a new hire on the 32nd floor. I was there today and I saw the Nightingale failure. Everyone is looking at what's missing, but nobody is looking at where it went. And nobody is looking at the connection between the UI crash and the scheduling module disappearance." Sterling stood up. The 2 minutes were up. He crossed his arms over his chest. He was a professional. He would not laugh in this kid's face no matter how absurd this was. "Listen, Marcus, you're an observant young man, but the idea that this is a deliberate act of sabotage. We have the best security in the world. The logs show no breaches." "They don't show a breach because there was no breach," Marcus said, his voice even. "The data was moved from inside the system, not from outside. And the person who did it didn't leave a trail because the system was designed to hide it. That's what's wrong. The system wasn't built to be secure, it was built to look secure while also having a hidden backdoor. And the man who designed it, the man who built this company's entire infrastructure from the ground up, is still here. You've been trusting him with your company's lifeblood for years. He's the only one who could do it. And I know how to find the proof." Sterling stood in silence. His mind, trained to find patterns in chaos, began to connect the dots Marcus had just laid out. The specific, targeted nature of the failures. The lack of a breach. The impossible coincidences. He scoffed, ready to dismiss the boy, but the words felt hollow in his own ears. He looked at Marcus, at the confidence in his eyes, and found himself listening, truly listening for the first time in months. The boy's idea was crazy. But it was also the first thing he'd heard that made a terrifying kind of sense. Jonathan Sterling's office, a sanctuary of control and order, had become the epicenter of his doubt. He stared at Marcus, a lanky teenager who seemed to have just blown a hole through months of professional analysis. The boys claimed that the failures were a diversion, not a mistake, was audacious. Yet, the more Sterling turned it over in his mind, the more it fit the inexplicable puzzle pieces. The quiet, targeted nature of the attacks. The way the data didn't just vanish but left a confusing trail that pointed in a dozen wrong directions. "You're telling me," Sterling said, his voice low and dangerous, "that this entire system, the very infrastructure that built this company, was designed with a backdoor?" Marcus met his gaze unflinchingly. "Not a backdoor in the traditional sense, sir. It's more like a hidden set of functions. A failsafe, maybe, but one that can be repurposed. It's embedded deep in the legacy code, in the initial data transfer protocols. The system doesn't log a delete command, it logs a transfer to an unclassified location. And because that transfer is an internal function, the security system doesn't flag it as suspicious. It just sees it as a system artifact, a ghost in the machine." Sterling walked to his window, his hands clasped behind his back, and looked out at the city. The lights were beginning to twinkle on. The city, like his company, was a complex machine of interconnected systems. If one part was compromised, the entire thing could collapse. The man who designed our system, our entire legacy framework, was Julian Vance. He retired 2 years ago. He was a pioneer. A genius. "A genius who built the house with a secret room," Marcus said calmly. "The login UI bug, the one everyone is calling a coincidence, is the key. The scheduling module and the login process have one thing in common. They both call the same master registry function, a legacy piece of code that was never updated. When the scheduler was moved, that registry function had to update its pointers. The ghost transfer function, to hide its tracks, also initiated a secondary, small-scale process in a completely different part of the system, the login UI, to make it look like a cascading failure." Sterling turned back to him, the incredulity on his face replaced by a cold, calculating curiosity. He was a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. "How do you know this?" "I don't," Marcus admitted. "Not for a fact. But it's the only explanation that accounts for all the data. The security logs show a massive data transfer at the same time as a minor, unrelated UI error. The two data points are a perfect match, a temporal echo. The system's failures are being orchestrated to look like a complete breakdown, when in fact they are a series of surgical strikes." "And your incredible idea is, what exactly?" Sterling asked, a hint of a challenge in his voice. "You've presented the theory. What's the proof?" "We can't find it with the standard diagnostic tools because they're all built on the same compromised foundation," Marcus explained. "We need to build a new set of tools. A shadow diagnostic system. It won't look at the data, it will look at the absence of data. I can build a program that maps the system's dependencies in real time, then cross-references the logs for any unclassified activity. It won't just look for data transfers, it will look for missing update or delete commands. If a project is missing but there is no delete command logged, there has to be a hidden transfer. My program will flag that." He pulled out his phone and with a few quick taps showed Sterling a simple, elegant flow chart. "I've been working on a proof of concept for a side project. It's a low-level network monitoring tool I call Spectre. It's designed to see the things the system is designed to ignore. It could run in the background, a silent observer, logging every anomalous internal data action. We'd have to install it directly on the main server, where the core legacy code is hosted. Then we wait." Sterling's mind reeled. The boy's idea was brilliant in its simplicity, its audacity. A tool to catch a ghost by looking for its footprints. The professional consultants had failed because they were looking for a breach, for a hacker. They were looking at the front door while the thief was walking out the back. "This is madness," Sterling said, more to himself than to Marcus. "Installing an unvetted program on our main server, it could do more damage." "It's a read-only program, sir," Marcus countered. "It doesn't write data or make any changes. Just listens. It's less intrusive than any of the diagnostics the consultants have run." Sterling stared at the phone in Marcus's hand, the simple flow chart a testament to a mind that saw the world differently. He had built his fortune on calculated risks, and this felt like the biggest one yet. Trusting a teenager with the company's future, a kid whose father he had just hired. The professional pride in him screamed against it, but the desperation, the cold dread he had lived with for months, urged him forward. "If you're wrong," Sterling said, his eyes narrowing, "if this causes more problems, You and your father will both be out of a job. Do you understand? Marcus didn't flinch. I understand, sir. But I'm not wrong. Sterling sighed, running a hand over his tired face. All right, Marcus. You have my attention. We'll set this up. But no one, and I mean no one, can know about this. Not your father, not my board, not the IT department. This stays between us. I'll get you access to the server room tomorrow night after everyone has left. You'll install your Spectre program and we'll see if your ghost shows up. But if it doesn't, this conversation never happened. Marcus finally allowed himself a small, confident smile. It will, sir. I promise. The 2 minutes had stretched into 20, and the CEO of Innovate Dynamics, a man who had built his empire on data and logic, was now placing the fate of his company on the word of a teenager. He watched Marcus leave, the boy's quiet confidence a stark contrast to the chaos swirling below. The ghost had a name now, Julian Vance, and a plan to catch it. The game had changed, and Jonathan Sterling, for the first time in months, felt a flicker of hope amidst the disarray. The hunt was on. The Innovate Dynamics headquarters was a silent mausoleum after midnight. The city below, a vibrant tapestry of light and life, was a world away. On the 48th floor, the only sound was the soft ping of an elevator and the faint hum of air conditioning. Jonathan Sterling, dressed in a black turtleneck and jeans, felt like a spy in his own building. He held a small, unassuming keycard, a master key that bypassed all security protocols, given to him by a very nervous head of security who had been explicitly told it was for a private systems audit. He met Marcus in the main lobby. The teenager looked even younger without the hustle of the daytime office around him. He carried a nondescript laptop bag which held the fate of a multi-billion-dollar company. Sterling didn't speak. He simply led Marcus through the deserted corridors to the server room, a place typically buzzing with the controlled chaos of IT professionals. The air in the server room was cold and sterile, a testament to the thousands of microprocessors working in silent unison. Rows of humming servers stood like metallic monoliths, their blinking lights the only sign of life. This is it, Sterling said, his voice barely a whisper. The central nervous system of Innovate Dynamics. The legacy framework is on these 2 main racks here. He gestured to 2 towering black cabinets with more cables than Marcus had ever seen in one place. Marcus opened his bag and pulled out a sleek, minimalist laptop. He didn't speak as he went to work. His fingers, a blur of motion, navigated the complex network architecture with a practiced ease that belied his age. He wasn't just typing commands, he was having a conversation with the machine, a silent dialogue of logic and code. He plugged a small USB drive into the main server console and began the installation. Sterling watched, his heart a drum against his ribs. Every fiber of his professional being screamed at the recklessness of this. An unvetted program written by a high school student, being installed on the very core of his business. The potential for catastrophic failure was immense. But the alternative, to continue to bleed projects and watch his company crumble, was no longer an option. He was all in. A simple, elegant black terminal appeared on the screen, a single white cursor blinking. Then a line of text, Spectre version 1.0. Listening. It's installed, Marcus announced, his voice quiet. It's running in the background. It's not a full application, it's more like a low-level network filter. It's looking for data transfers that don't have a matching log entry, or for log entries that don't make sense. It's also monitoring the legacy master registry for any unexplained changes. Now we wait. They spent the next 4 hours in tense silence, the only light the faint glow of the server status lights and the muted light from Marcus's laptop. The silence was punctuated by the rhythmic thrum of the servers, a constant, unchanging sound that was both calming and maddening. Sterling found himself pacing, unable to sit still. He had built this company from a garage startup, a testament to his own foresight and will. Now, his company's fate was in the hands of a 17-year-old and a program named Spectre. Marcus, by contrast, was a portrait of serenity. He sat hunched over his laptop, his eyes fixed on the screen, a single line of text his entire world. He wasn't just waiting, he was listening. He was reading the silent language of the network, the constant data flow, the tiny, almost imperceptible shifts that signaled a change. He knew the ghost would not come out in a blaze of glory. It would be subtle, a whisper in the static. Suddenly, a new line of text appeared on the screen. It wasn't a blaring alert. It was a simple informational log. Anomaly detected. Master registry update initiated. Unclassified pointer change. Source internal. Sterling's pacing stopped dead. He leaned in, his eyes fixed on the screen. What is that? What does that mean? Marcus didn't move, but his voice was tight with focused energy. It's not a project failure. Not yet. It's a small-scale change. The master registry, the one that points to all the data in the system, just had a single entry updated without a proper protocol. Something was moved. A very small something. Something to test the water. He typed furiously, his fingers a dance of precision. The unclassified transfer was a single data packet. Just a few bytes. Not a project. It's a test run. The ghost is waking up. A test run? Sterling asked, his mind racing. For what? Marcus's eyes widened, a sudden realization dawning on him. He pulled up a complex data visualization on his screen, a swirling nebula of interconnected nodes and lines. This is a real-time map of our projects and their dependencies. The data packet that was just moved, it was a subroutine, a tiny piece of code from the FinTech initiative. It's a new project, a massive one. We've been planning to launch the beta in a week. Sterling's blood ran cold. The FinTech initiative was his pet project, a huge investment in a new market. It was the future of Innovate Dynamics. So this isn't a random attack. It's a coordinated, targeted effort. Exactly, Marcus said, his voice edged with urgency. The ghost isn't just causing chaos, it's destroying the company from the inside out. And this isn't just about sabotaging projects. The original architect, the ghost, is trying to create a narrative of incompetence. By making it seem like a systemic failure, he's paving the way for someone to come in and fix it. Someone who just happens to be a perfect fit for the job. The same man who designed the backdoor in the first place. Sterling stared at the screen, the blinking anomaly a tiny, silent scream of warning. He had his proof. The ghost was real, and it was preparing to strike at the heart of his company's future. The silence of the server room was now an oppressive weight, a ticking clock counting down to disaster. They had caught the first sign of movement, but it was just the beginning. The real battle was about to begin. Jonathan Sterling's mind, a finely tuned instrument of corporate strategy, was now a whirlwind of raw fear and focused anger. The silent alert from Marcus's program had confirmed his worst suspicions. This wasn't a series of unfortunate events, it was a cold, calculated assault. The FinTech initiative, his legacy project, was next on the chopping block. A test run, Sterling repeated, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He's probing our defenses, seeing if the system will flag the transfer. He's preparing to destroy the one thing that can save this company. He looked at Marcus, whose focused intensity was the only calm in the storm. What do? We can't just wait for it to happen. We don't, Marcus said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He pulled up a second, more complex screen, a real-time network topology map of the entire building. Lines and nodes pulsed with the invisible flow of data. Spectre isn't just listening for anomalies, it's also tracking them. The master registry update originated from a specific network node. It's a closed-circuit transfer, a ghost transfer, but it still has a point of origin. It's just designed to obfuscate it. Sterling leaned in, his eyes scanning the glowing map. Can you trace it? I've already started, Marcus replied. The transfer was routed through a series of proxy nodes, all internal, all legacy. It's designed to be a digital wild goose chase. But Spectre is different. It's not looking at the headers, it's looking at the data packets themselves. It's following the breadcrumbs the system was designed to hide. It's the difference between following a street map and following a specific car. He pointed to a specific node on the map, a tiny pulsing red dot far from the bustling IT hub. This is the source. The ghost transfer originated from a workstation on the 18th floor. It's a low-level access point, a generic terminal used by a rotating pool of employees. Sterling's brow furrowed. The 18th floor, that's the marketing department. It makes no sense. The original architect, Julian Vance, wouldn't be working from a marketing terminal. Vance isn't doing this himself, sir. He's retired, Marcus explained patiently. He's the one who designed the backdoor. But someone else is using it. Someone on the inside, someone with access to his legacy code, or at least the knowledge of how to trigger it. The person who initiated the transfer from the 18th floor is just the messenger. A proxy. A horrifying thought dawned on Sterling. The man who had hired David Hayes, the head of engineering, had been a strong advocate for the new database schema. He was an ally. But what if he was a patsy? Or worse, a co-conspirator? The sense of betrayal was a cold shock to his system. He had trusted his inner circle. We need to get to that workstation, Sterling decided, a new resolve hardening his features. Before the next transfer. Before the full attack. We can't just walk up there and start poking around, Marcus warned. The person who initiated the transfer will know something is up. The next transfer might be the last one, the big one. We need to be careful. We need to act like ghosts ourselves. He pulled out a second, smaller device, a network tap he had built himself. We can install this on the floor's main network switch. It will act as a secondary filter, a silent observer that won't show up on any network diagnostics. It will track all data from that specific workstation and create a clean log for us. That log will show us the user, the time, and the exact files being transferred. It will give us proof. Sterling looked at the device in Marcus's hand. A piece of hardware a multi-billion-dollar company should have designed, but a kid had. The irony wasn't lost on him. All right, let's go. We're on the clock. They took the service elevator, a cage of cold steel and flickering fluorescent lights, down to the 18th floor. The marketing department was a sea of pastel cubicles and motivational posters, a stark contrast to the grim reality of corporate espionage. Marcus found the main network closet, a small locked room that smelled of ozone and dust. Sterling used his master keycard to open it. Marcus worked with a quiet intensity, his movements precise and economical. He spliced the network tap onto the main switch, a tiny, almost invisible change in a jungle of wires. Within minutes, the tap was running, a silent hunter waiting for its prey. Back in the server room, they watched the network topology map. The node on the 18th floor was still red, but now a second, even smaller dot had appeared next to it, an invisible digital twin. This was their tap. We have to wait now, Marcus said, his eyes glued to the screen. The proxy will initiate the transfer when they think no one is watching. Could be tonight. It could be tomorrow morning. We just have to be ready to intercept it. Sterling looked at the time on his phone. It was almost 3 a.m. He was running on pure adrenaline. He had a teenager, the son of a new employee, running a shadow operation in his own building. The absurdity of it all was almost comical, but the stakes were deadly serious. Suddenly, the red dot on the 18th floor began to pulse, a rapid, frantic beat. The screen flashed a new alert. Anomaly detected. Large-scale data transfer initiated. Unclassified pointer change. Source: 18th floor workstation 4B. He's moving the whole project, Marcus said, his voice hushed. The entire FinTech initiative codebase. He's not just testing, he's going for the kill. Sterling's phone buzzed with an incoming text from his head of IT, a man named Henderson who was now on call. System anomaly detected. Massive, unclassified data transfer initiated. No external breach. Investigating. Sterling ignored the message. He already knew what was happening. He didn't need a formal report. He had his own hunter, his own ghost catcher. He looked at the workstation number, 4B. He knew who sat at that desk. The head of marketing. A man he had trusted for years, a man who was also a close personal friend of Julian Vance, the original architect. The betrayal was like a physical blow. The game was no longer a mystery. It was a confrontation. The silence of the server room was shattered by the frantic blinking of the red dot on Marcus's screen. The full-scale attack had begun. The FinTech initiative, the future of Innovate Dynamics, was in the process of being systematically dismantled. Jonathan Sterling stared at the screen, his mind struggling to process the depth of the betrayal. Workstation 4B. Mark Harrington. His friend. The man he had played golf with for the last 15 years. He's not just moving the code, Marcus said, his voice low and urgent. He's encrypting it on the way out. It's not just being hidden, it's being corrupted. Once the transfer is complete, the original files will be unreadable. We're on a timer. Sterling's hands clenched into fists. We have to stop him. Now. We can't just unplug the servers, sir, Marcus cautioned, his eyes still glued to the glowing terminal. It'll crash the entire network. We'll lose everything. Then what do we do? Sterling's voice was a low growl of frustration. We have the proof. We know the workstation. We know the man. Let's go to the 18th floor and shut him down. And what happens when he hits the enter key before we get there? The transfer is already in progress. The moment the connection is broken, the corrupt data will be finalized. The project will be gone. We have to stop the transfer without breaking the connection, and we have to do it from here. Marcus's logic, cold and unforgiving, cut through Sterling's rage. The boy was right. A physical confrontation wouldn't save the project. It would only guarantee its destruction. The solution had to be surgical, a digital scalpel, not a sledgehammer. Spectre, Marcus began, his fingers a blur across the keyboard. I designed it to not just listen but to react. The ghost transfer has a hidden command that makes it bypass standard logging protocols. That command, that tiny piece of legacy code, is also its biggest vulnerability. It was built to be a one-way street, a silent exit. It wasn't built to be intercepted. He pulled up a second window, a terminal showing a long list of hexadecimal code. I can find the exact memory address of the ghost transfer function and inject a command. A simple command, a kill switch. I can make the transfer terminate itself. It will still corrupt the data that's already been transferred, but it will save the majority of the project. Sterling watched him, a silent observer of a different kind of warfare. This was not a boardroom battle of numbers and strategy. This was a battle of wits and code, a silent duel in the heart of the machine. The fate of his company hung in the balance. Meanwhile, on the 18th floor, the head of marketing, Mark Harrington, sat hunched over his terminal, a man transformed. The affable, joke-cracking salesman was gone, replaced by a tense, focused operative. He was running a small, innocuous-looking program on his screen, a simple timer, counting down to the final upload. He had been promised a new life, a new beginning, a new company by his old friend Julian Vance. All he had to do was press one button and destroy the one thing Sterling held dear. He had convinced himself that Sterling deserved this, that he was too trusting, too naive to lead a company in the modern age. Just then the phone on his desk rang. It was Sterling. Mark's heart sank. He knew with a bone-deep certainty that his time was up. "Jonathan," he said, his voice a pathetic imitation of its usual cheerfulness. "Late night for you too, huh?" "Don't lie to me, Mark." Sterling's voice was a cold, hard line of authority. "I know what you're doing. I know you're sitting at workstation 4B, and I know you're running the transfer for the FinTech initiative." Mark's facade crumbled. He looked at his screen at the timer that still had 2 minutes to go. "You don't know what you're talking about, Jonathan. It's a systems audit. Julian asked me to do it. Just a routine check on the legacy code. Julian Vance is retired, Mark. The system is compromised. And I'm watching you. I'm watching the transfer in real time. You're a pawn, Mark. A very foolish pawn." The words hit Mark like a physical blow. He looked at his screen at the timer, and for the first time, a sliver of doubt, of fear began to creep in. He had been so sure of his mission, so certain of the righteousness of Julian's cause. But Sterling's voice, cold and unwavering, planted a seed of doubt. Back in the server room, Marcus's hands froze. The kill switch was ready, but he couldn't execute it. The command was designed to terminate the transfer, but it would also leave a gaping hole in the network, a digital footprint that could be traced. If he did this, the system would immediately flag an error. The company would know something was up. Sterling's clandestine operation would be exposed. "We can't just terminate it, sir," Marcus said, his voice barely audible. "The system will flag a catastrophic failure. Your head of IT will know something is wrong. He'll roll back the last save and it'll all be for nothing." Sterling, on the phone with Mark, heard the urgency in Marcus's voice. He made a snap decision. "What if we don't terminate it? What if we just pause it?" Marcus's head shot up, his eyes wide. "A pause? The transfer protocol has no pause function. It was never designed for that. The ghost code is a one-way street." "Then you have to create one," Sterling commanded, his voice filled with a desperate conviction. "You have 30 seconds to inject a new command. Something that makes the system think it's still running, but the transfer is frozen. You have to buy us time." Marcus nodded, his fingers moving with a frantic, desperate speed. He wasn't just a coder, he was an artist. He found the exact loop in the transfer protocol, a tiny, almost invisible part of the ghost code that could be manipulated. He created a false heartbeat, a simple pulse command that would tell the system the transfer was still active, but the data flow was at a standstill. Meanwhile, on the 18th floor, Mark, his face pale with fear, looked at his screen. The timer had stopped. The transfer percentage was frozen at 78%. He frantically hit the enter key, but nothing happened. He began to curse, punching the keyboard in a fit of impotent rage. "It's over, Mark," Sterling said into the phone, his voice tinged with a sad finality. "The transfer is frozen. We have the logs. We have the proof. And we have you. You've been a friend, Mark, but I can't protect you from this. We're going to fix this and you're going to help me." Mark Harrington sat in silence, defeated. The dream of a new company, of revenge, had dissolved into the cold reality of betrayal. The silent, invisible war in the heart of Innovate Dynamics had finally come to an end. But as Marcus's screen showed the logs of the frozen transfer, a new, more sinister thought dawned on Sterling. Mark was a pawn. But who was the queen? The true mastermind, Julian Vance, was still out there, his ghost code a silent testament to his control. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The digital clock on the server room console read 3:47 a.m. Jonathan Sterling stood in the sterile, humming quiet, the phone still warm in his hand. He had just ended the call with Mark Harrington, a conversation that had been both a victory and a profound personal defeat. The fintech initiative was paused, a digital patient on life support, but the betrayal felt like a dagger in his own back. Marcus, a silent sentinel, had already gotten to work. He was running a full diagnostic on the fintech initiative's frozen codebase, trying to assess the extent of the damage. 78% of the data is corrupted, sir, he said, his voice flat. The transfer was halfway through. The corrupted data is encrypted and useless. But the remaining 22%, the untransferred data, is safe. We can rebuild from it. It will take time, but it's not a total loss. Sterling nodded slowly, the information sinking in. He had a path forward for the company, but a far more complicated one for himself. He had to understand the why. Why would Julian Vance, the man who had built Innovate Dynamics from the ground up, want to see it burn? He had to see Mark face to face. "Marcus, I need you to stay here," Sterling said, his voice now a steely command. "Keep a watch on this transfer. Do not move from this spot. If that pause fails, we're done. I'm going to the 18th floor." "What about my dad, sir?" Marcus asked, his voice laced with concern. "He'll be here soon. He doesn't know what's going on." "He'll be in for a surprise," Sterling said grimly. "I'll handle it. But right now, you are the most important person in this building. You are the only one who can see what the ghost is doing. Don't tell your father anything. This is still a two-person operation." Sterling left the server room and took the service elevator back to the 18th floor. The marketing department was a wasteland of half-eaten donuts and forgotten coffee cups. He found Mark Harrington exactly where he had left him, hunched over his workstation. The screen was black, the transfer a frozen moment in time. Mark's face was a mask of defeat, his eyes red-rimmed and filled with a mixture of fear and defiance. "Why, Mark?" Sterling asked, standing over him, his shadow engulfing the man. "We were friends. You were with me from the beginning. Why would you do this?" Mark looked up, a bitter smile on his face. "Julian was right about you, Jonathan. You were too busy chasing the next big thing to remember the people who got you there. Julian built this company. His code is the foundation. And what did you do? You moved on. You brought in new people, new ideas, new systems. You were going to erase his legacy. He saw it coming. He built the backdoor, the ghost code, as a failsafe. A way to remind you of the architect, a way to tear it all down if you ever forgot." "He wanted to destroy his own creation?" Sterling asked, incredulous. "Because of ego?" "No," Mark said, shaking his head. "Because of respect. He didn't want to watch his life's work get corrupted by your progress. He wasn't going to let you tear it down. He wanted to show you that his code, his genius, was still the only thing holding it all together. He was going to watch you fail, watch you get desperate, and then he would have come in. He would have offered to fix it all. He would have gotten his seat back on the board, his authority. His legacy would have been secured. This was never about destroying the company, it was about taking it back." Sterling's mind reeled. It wasn't about money or corporate sabotage, it was about a man's pride. A man who felt forgotten and disrespected, and who had built a digital weapon to regain his power. Julian Vance, the genius architect, had become a vengeful ghost. "Where is he, Mark?" Sterling demanded. "Where is Julian now? He must have a terminal, a way of watching all this." Mark just shook his head. "You won't find him, Jonathan. He's smarter than you. He's smarter than all of us. He's a ghost in the machine, and he's everywhere and nowhere. He's always one step ahead." Sterling left the 18th floor with a new sense of purpose. The enemy was no longer a mystery, he was a man. A man with a motive, a plan, and a network of loyalists. The battle was no longer just about saving a project. It was about protecting the company from its own past. He returned to the server room just as the first light of dawn was beginning to pierce the darkness. Marcus was still there, a weary but determined young man, hunched over his laptop. David Hayes, Marcus's father, was now standing over him, a look of utter confusion and concern on his face. "What is going on, Marcus?" David asked, his voice low and tight. "I've been here for an hour. Henderson from IT just told me there was a massive data anomaly. And Sterling, he was here with you? You're not supposed to be here." Sterling stepped into the room and David's eyes widened in recognition. "Jonathan? What's happening? Why is my son here?" "David," Sterling said, his voice calm but firm. "I know this is going to sound incredible, but your son just saved this company. He just stopped a full-scale attack on the FinTech initiative, an attack that was orchestrated from within our own building." He gestured to Marcus. "Your son isn't just a kid who knows code. He's a genius. He saw what none of us could see. The entire system, the legacy framework, was designed with a backdoor by Julian Vance. Vance is trying to take the company down, to prove that his legacy is the only thing that matters." David Hayes stared at his son, then at Sterling, then back at the blinking terminal. The world he knew, a world of logic and order, had been turned on its head. "A backdoor? Julian Vance? That's impossible." "It's not," Sterling countered. "And we have proof. But we have a problem. Julian Vance is still out there. We caught his pawn, but we haven't caught him. And he's going to know something is up. He's going to come back. We need to catch the ghost, and we need to do it on our terms." He looked at David, then at Marcus. "We need a new plan. A plan that Vance can't see coming. Something that uses his own ghost against him. Something that will lure him out of the shadows. And I need both of you to help me." Marcus looked at his father, and for the first time, the full weight of his involvement became clear. His father, a man who had only ever known corporate honor and integrity, was now being drawn into a conspiracy. But David, after a moment of stunned silence, looked at his son and saw the same quiet determination. He looked at Sterling, the CEO who had entrusted his company to a teenager. He finally understood. "What's the plan?" David asked, the question a quiet, simple declaration of his loyalty. "What do we do now?" The morning sun, a stark and unforgiving orange, cast long shadows across the server room floor. The air, once thick with the sterile hum of technology, now crackled with a new energy, the focused intensity of a team preparing for a counterattack. Jonathan, Sterling, David Hayes, and Marcus stood hunched over a glowing monitor, a silent war room in the heart of Innovate Dynamics. "Julian Vance isn't a hacker," Sterling stated, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. "He's an architect. He built this house. He's not going to come in through a window. He's going to use the secret staircase he designed himself. And he's going to use it to prove a point." David, still reeling from the revelation of his idol's betrayal, nodded grimly. "He sees our new code, my new schema, as an affront. He's not just trying to cause chaos, he's trying to demonstrate the superiority of his own system by making ours look weak. The more we try to patch things, the more we play into his hand." Marcus, the silent observer who had now become the team's leader in this digital war, finally spoke. "We can use that against him. His ego is the key. He's not going to be content with just causing chaos. He wants to be seen as the savior. He wants to be the one to fix it all. But he can't fix what he's already broken if we don't let him. So, we give him something new to break." He began to sketch a new network map on a digital whiteboard. "We create a new project. A fake one. A ghost project. We'll give it a name that's a direct affront to his ego. Something that screams, 'We're moving on from your legacy.' We'll call it Project Genesis. We'll make it look like a critical new initiative, a complete and total overhaul of his legacy code. Sterling's eyes lit up. It was a brilliant, devious idea. It was a direct challenge to the ghost, a way to lure him out of the shadows. And he'll take the bait. He'll want to destroy it before it can even get off the ground. He'll see it as a direct threat to his entire vision. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. He'll use his ghost code to prune it. And when he does, we'll be ready. My Spectre program is now a hunter, not just a listener. It can recognize the unique signature of his transfer protocol. The moment he takes the bait, Spectre will not just log the anomaly, it will initiate a counter protocol. We'll use his own secret staircase to trace the command back to its origin. David's mind, a methodical instrument of engineering, began to see the logic. But what if he sees the counter protocol? He's a genius. He built the system. He'll know something is wrong. He won't, Marcus said with quiet confidence. I'll make the counter protocol a silent, background process. It'll be a digital echo of his own ghost code. It won't terminate the transfer. It will just ride along with it, a digital parasite. It will follow the data back to its source, no matter how many internal proxies he uses. It's like a silent tracer. He won't know it's there until we have the logs, the IP address, and the user credentials of his current location. The plan was audacious, risky, and beautiful in its simplicity. It used Vance's pride, his genius, and his own system against him. The three men, a CEO, a senior data architect, and a teenage prodigy, began to work with a frantic, focused energy. Sterling went to work on the board, a series of urgent calls and meetings to create a diversion. He publicly announced that the FinTech initiative was moving forward, and that a new, critical project was in the works to modernize the legacy framework. The lie was meant to infuriate Vance, to make him act with haste and arrogance. David and Marcus, a father-son team united by crisis, began building the Ghost Project, a digital decoy. They created the skeleton of Project Genesis, a small, seemingly insignificant piece of code that was, in fact, a digital can of worms. It had all the trappings of a new high-priority project, but it was nothing more than a lure. They deliberately left a flaw in its architecture, a gaping hole that only Vance's ghost code could exploit. It was a single line of code, a digital welcome mat. As the day wore on, the tension in the building was a palpable force. The IT department, oblivious to the truth, was a whirlwind of activity, working to fix the FinTech initiative. The board, placated by Sterling's public pronouncements, was cautiously optimistic. The world outside the glass walls of the 48th floor was moving on. But inside, a silent war was being waged. By late afternoon, the trap was set. Project Genesis was uploaded to the server, a digital canary waiting in the mine. The Spectre counter protocol was running in the background, a silent hunter waiting for its prey. Sterling sat in his office, his eyes fixed on a small, unassuming terminal on his desk. It was Marcus's laptop, and it was a direct feed to the server room. The screen was black, a single line of text blinking in the darkness, awaiting Ghost's signature. David was in his own office, working on the fix for the FinTech initiative, a public performance of corporate diligence. He knew that the fate of his job, his son's future, and the company itself now rested on the patience of a proud, vengeful genius. The sun set, and the city lights began to twinkle on. The building once again became a silent mausoleum. Sterling watched the screen, the blinking cursor a heartbeat counting down to a moment of truth. He didn't know when Vance would strike or how, but he knew he would. The ghost had to. It was a matter of his own, self-proclaimed genius. And for a man like Julian Vance, that was a temptation he couldn't resist. The trap was ready. All they had to do was wait for the ghost to walk into it. The digital clock on the server room console was a relentless, glowing reminder of the passage of time. It was well past midnight. Jonathan Sterling sat motionless, his eyes fixed on Marcus's laptop screen. The terminal, which had been a black void for hours, suddenly came to life. A single, silent line of code, the ghost's signature, appeared. Anomaly detected. Master registry update initiated. Target, Project Genesis. The trap was sprung. Julian Vance, the architect of a silent corporate war, had taken the bait. A collective, held breath filled the server room. David Hayes stood behind his son, a hand on his shoulder, his face a mixture of fear and pride. This was it. The moment that would either save their company or expose them to a catastrophic failure. "He's in," Marcus whispered, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "He's running the prune protocol. He thinks he's destroying a critical new project, but he's just walking through a digital minefield." As the transfer began, a new set of data began to appear on the screen, a swirling cascade of hexadecimal code. This was not the transfer itself. This was the Spectre counter protocol, the silent hunter, doing its work. It was riding along with Vance's ghost command, a digital shadow following the breadcrumbs back to the source. The screen showed a series of network hops, a frantic, convoluted dance through internal proxies, a deliberate attempt to obscure the origin. But the counter protocol was unforgiving. It didn't care about the proxies or the fake headers. It followed the data itself, a silent tracer tracking the signal back to its source. The logs began to fill with a slow, methodical precision. Trace initiated. Proxy 1 identified. Proxy 2 identified. Proxy 7 identified. The hops continued for agonizing minutes, the tension in the room growing with each new line of code. Sterling's mind raced. He knew Vance was a genius, a man who had built this labyrinth. What if there was a trap? What if the counter protocol was a mistake? "He's using the full legacy framework," Marcus explained, his eyes never leaving the screen. "Every node, every transfer protocol, every hidden loop. He's trying to make it look like it's coming from everywhere at once. It's his final masterpiece of misdirection." Then the final line appeared. The ghost had reached its home. Trace complete. Origin, external IP. User credentials identified. Location, Vance private server 1221 Willow Creek Drive, apartment 3C. Sterling stared at the screen, a cold certainty washing over him. The address, the user credentials, it was all there. Julian Vance, the reclusive architect, was not a ghost. He was just a man in a small apartment, running his silent war from the quiet of his retirement. He was in Vance's house. The game was over. Sterling took out his phone. He didn't call the police. He didn't call the board. He called Julian Vance directly, the number a relic from a past friendship. The phone rang 3 times before a weary voice, the voice of a man who knew he had been caught, answered. "Jonathan?" Vance's voice was a low growl of defeat. "I knew you wouldn't give up. You always were stubborn." "Hello, Julian," Sterling said, his voice calm, filled with a final, sad authority. "We're watching you. We've got the logs. We've got the IP address. We have everything. You're not a ghost, Julian. You're just a man with a grudge." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, a silence heavy with the weight of a ruined legacy. "How?" Vance finally asked, the single word a hollow echo of his defeat. "My system was perfect. It was untraceable." "It was perfect, Julian," Sterling conceded. "But you weren't dealing with a professional. You were dealing with a kid. A genius kid. He saw the flaws in your perfection. He saw the pride in your code. He saw the ghost you wanted to be, and he built a program to catch it. He built a program that used your own legacy against you." Sterling turned the phone to face the monitor, and Marcus, with a quiet, somber respect, displayed the complete logs of the transfer, the IP address, and the user credentials. Vance saw his own masterpiece of misdirection, his ultimate weapon, laid bare. "Now," Sterling said, his voice hard. "You have 2 choices. You can either walk away. We'll fix your damage and this will be over. Or you can come in and help us fix it. You can repair your legacy, Julian, or you can watch it crumble." Vance's voice, a tired whisper, came through the phone. "I'll be there in the morning." The ghost had been caught. With the new dawn, a new era began for Innovate Dynamics. The chaos had a name, a motive, and a final resolution. The FinTech initiative, though damaged, was recoverable. David Hayes led the team, now with a new sense of purpose and a newfound respect for the fresh ideas that had saved the company. He saw his son not just as a brilliant kid, but as an integral part of the future. Jonathan Sterling, a man who had trusted data and professionals above all else, had a new perspective. He saw that innovation wasn't just about the next big thing, it was about the people, the fresh perspectives, and the quiet, unassuming geniuses who saw the world differently. He had entrusted his company to a teenager and his father, and they had not just saved it, but they had given it a new lease on life. Marcus Hayes, the quiet teenager who saw the logic of a ghost, became a legend in the building. He was offered a full-time position, a job to become the lead of a new department, a Spectre division dedicated to finding the silent flaws, the hidden vulnerabilities in the system. The boy who was supposed to be a spectator became the architect of a new, more secure future for Innovate Dynamics. The company's new legacy was no longer built on the ego of one man, but on the collaborative strength of a team. The chaos had been an illusion, and the real victory was in uncovering the truth and building a better, stronger company in its place. The ghost was gone, and in its place was a renewed sense of purpose and a new team of heroes. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video.